Give you a 30-second countdown now. 30 seconds. Good evening. I'm Gundar Oswald, the program chair for SEBoK chapter. Today we have Paul Martin discussing something different about system thinking. Go to it, Paul.
Okay, thanks. I really appreciate the honor of being able to speak to you guys. I've been part of this august body since 2001, maybe 2000. So, and I always appreciate the times that I can come and share some thoughts that I've had. This is actually something I brought up for work. They only gave me 18 minutes. So now I'm going to try to span it out to an hour. We'll see if I can do that. What I want to do is talk about really, and by the way, every now and then I'm going to pause and look at my notes. This is one of my first briefs that I've done that I wrote out everything I want to say. And I'm terrified I might forget something or something. So tonight's lecture, I'm going to examine systems thinking in response to some difficulties and limitations that have come out of traditional science. And my talk, I got my name for my talk from this really great book by Robert Pirsig. Back in 1974, he wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. As a matter of fact, I can't say I've ever read it, okay? I've listened to it at least twice. I try to listen to it every 5 years. It's kind of this metaphysical thing about quality and dealing with rationality. It's a pretty heavy book, actually. And he starts the book with this author's note that says, this book should in no way be associated with the great body of factual information relating to Orthodox Zen Buddhism practice. And it's not very factual on motorcycles either. And the reason I bring that up is I actually want to have the same sentiments. I'm going to touch on Zen a little bit, maybe dabble in a little bit of their high aspects of their philosophy, but there's no way that it's even close to what Zen is all about. And the other thing about motorcycles, well, mine's systems thinking, look, it's very little practicalities here, but I am going to give you some philosophical thinking to go into your evening, and hopefully that'll entertain you. So we'll see what happens after that. So before we get too far, let's talk about Zen a little bit. Zen, for those who are unfamiliar, it's a branch of Buddhism that started in China and started being flourish in Japan when it moved to there. One of the main tenets is the importance of being in the now. How many have heard of Zen meditation, right? Zen meditation. The whole point of Zen meditation is being in the now, you know, and being in the present. Okay, I bring that up only to ignore it because I don't want to go into that aspect of Zen. It's kind of useless for a system engineer because what do we do at the end of a project? We look at what we did and we jot down our lessons learned. So we're always concerned about the past. And also we look to the future because that's kind of what our ConOps, our concept of operations, is all about. What is our technology going to be like in the future? So that tenet is one thing of Zen I just want to kind of put aside. But there is an aspect of why they got to that point and where that derives from. And that is the aspect that Zen thinks about the fact that life and existence is based on a kind of a dynamic emptiness. Okay, I'm not trying to depress everybody, but Zen has this concept. As a matter of fact, Zen, the word itself, actually can be translated into emptiness or void. Now, they're not saying nothing exists. The point that they're trying to make is the fact that you shouldn't be looking at things by themselves and that they're somehow disconnected. It's all connected. It's all one thing, and it's called the universe. And that's the thing I want to kind of stress in today's talk. Russell Ackoff has this great quote that kind of goes into this. He talks about, we have to stop acting as though nature was organized into the disciplines in the same way that universities are. The point is that reality is really more than the sum of the disciplines we use to try to understand reality. And that's kind of where I want to go with that. But before I get into all this, I want to look at one key component of the system engineering discipline. You'll recognize it when I pull it up. It's a good starting point to understand, as I explain, those difficulty and limitations with the intellectual tradition of science. And that's the word analysis. And I'm just going to read this quote because it really does kind of mention everything that I want to talk about in terms of analysis. Since the turn of the century, now we're talking about the 20th century, the accepted approach to dealing with increased complexity is to try to reduce it into manageable bites and address them in isolation. This approach is referred to as analysis. We analyze a complex situation or issue by trying to break it down into component pieces and consider each in isolation from the others. This kind of thinking actually has its root in analytical geometry. One basic axiom is that the whole is equal to the sum of the parts. Think about that for a moment. There's an underlying assumption behind this conclusion is that all the parts are essentially independent of one another. And it's just one of the things that comes through when you start thinking about analysis. I'm going to get more and more into that in a little while, but let's use that analysis, breaking things into parts, when it comes to systems thinking. What does that mean? Thinking, of course, is a noun. It's the act of thinking. There are aspects to thinking that can throw us off. You know, we could have cognitive biases or mental models that may not be correct. But the adjective to that, right, systems thinking, the adjective that modifies that noun is systems. And you can think of systems as a whole consisting of interacting parts. That's a simple definition. We're going to get into more complex ones in a little bit. But the book that you're going to try to get tonight over here, Systems Thinking Made Simple, is a great quote in there that I want to read to you. And it says, system thinking is not a science. It's a conceptual ability, an orientation, a framework. However, systems thinking is informed about knowledge about systems. So with that in mind, let's think about what does that mean? What is a system? Of course, a whole consisting of interacting parts is a simple one. The one we're used to from Incose is a combination of interacting elements organized to achieve a purpose. All right? Or you could say it's a system of bonds of patterns at one or more scales of conceptualization. The patterns can be distinguished as the substance, the structure, and the dynamics of the system. Okay, that's a little bit more in terms of what a system is, but as you can see, there are many ways to come about this. So let's play a game. I'm going to show you a picture, and I need you guys to tell me, is it a system or is it a collection of parts? Okay, so football team. System, and why do we think it's a system? Does anybody know? It has a goal, it has a purpose, and what is that purpose? Win, yes, as a team. And there's interacting parts, right? All these football people are interacting with each other. Go Redskins, right, Maria? Go Redskins. Okay, so I had to throw that out for her. Okay, so it is a system. How about this? A toaster. System or collection of parts? System. Why is it a system? Yes. Yes, it does toast. Now, what's interesting though, what if I take this system and throw it into a kitchen? Oop, next. Throw it into a kitchen. It's just sitting there. It's all a collection of parts. Now, how would we actually get this into a system? What would we add? A restaurant kitchen is definitely a system. Why? Because there are people back there doing their thing, right? And the same here, right? If Maria goes in here, right? I'm sorry my kitchen doesn't look that good, Maria. I should have made ours look good. But if she went in there and started cooking something for me, right? Or I went in there and started cooking something for her, it would now become a system because I'm using the parts to do a purpose. All right, what about a marriage? And by the way, I just threw this up to embarrass my wife, and she's here, but I want to show how beautiful she is. Yeah, right. What do you think, Maria? Yes, definitely. What do you think it is? It's not. Yeah, right. Because we do interface. I'm just saying, every now and then we interface. So we're a system. So tools in a toolbox is a simple one. And that's parts. And what's interesting though, and we'll come back to this, I want you to rethink it after a while here. So a system has, so all this kind of gives us an idea of what, I know this is very simple, but we have defining characteristics of a system. We have a purpose, right? All the parts have to be together in order to accomplish that purpose. There's an order and arrangement in order to affect the performance of the system. Usually there's feedback involved to help you get stability. And all systems have a boundary. And remember I was talking about Zen Buddhism and what does it mean to have a boundary? And that's kind of where I want to go with this. So here's a challenge I have for you. It's the 9-dot system. Now, how many people know about this 9-dot problem? Right. So you guys probably went to a class and they said, oh, so what were they trying to get you to do? Think outside the box. And the box is what? A boundary. Right, right. So does anybody know how to do this? Can anybody remember? Oh, no, I showed him. See? Nobody? Come on up. Come on up. I want to see. We're not going to laugh at you because it is hard. It is hard. Jim, he's now a doctor, so it only makes sense to. I think he took a 2-week class on how to do this. It's actually, even if you know it's outside the box, it's a hard problem because, yeah. Yep. 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 Good. Very good. There you go. Good job. Good job. And just in case nobody figured it out, I actually show exactly what Jim did. Okay. Oh, hey, can we do it in 3, Jim? So here's the thing. We're thinking outside the box, right? What about those dots? Do the dots have boxes? Are they part of the boxes? You know, why do we have to go in the middle of the things, right? So if we now, you need a bigger piece of paper to make this work. That's why, even though if somebody wanted to do the 3-dot problem, they couldn't have done it on here because you would have to almost go to the ceiling. So basically what you do is go 1, hit the edge of each dot, go back, and then do it again. So that's good. It's thinking out, oh, what if we could do it in 1? Anybody think we could do it in 1? Yes, Jim. So Jim's right. You take it, you throw it into a cylinder. It's now 3-dimensional, and then you, whoa. So what's great about this is we started out thinking that this was just a 2-dimensional box in order to do our connections. And all of a sudden we're discovering new rules of thinking about boundaries. Boundaries are arbitrary. I mean, we're only putting boundaries on things because we're trying to understand them better, right? Our culture and our discipline is what's really driving the boundaries that we create. All right, let's make sure I don't lose where I'm at. So they're arbitrary and can be reset. So let me give you a little story about my challenge with boundaries and getting into this whole universe thing. Basically, it started with a quote from that great American author, Henry Miller. He said, "The moment one gives close attention to anything, even a blade of grass, it becomes a mysterious, awesome, indescribably magnificent world into itself." Isn't that a gorgeous quote? Thinking about the things. When I think of this, when I read this, I think of the Incredible Hulk. Yeah, no, the Incredible Hulk, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, so I guess I should explain that. The Incredible Hulk, hopefully you'll still respect me in the morning. Oh, went too far. I don't know what happened there. Hope you still respect me in the morning, but I do love comic books. Used to read them when I was young. Still read them, as a matter of fact. I have one next to my bed that I haven't looked at yet. But back in 1977, I read this Incredible Hulk comic book written by the great science fiction author Harlan Ellison wrote it. And it was the Incredible Hulk. He got shrunk to where the atoms became planets. And so he wound up on one of these microscopic planets, found love and adventure, and then he grew up, became big again, But as a young boy, it just was like, wow, there's like universes on your dust mote, on a dust mote on your jacket. That just amazed me. And then a few years later, I saw this film called The Power of Tens at the Smithsonian. And it starts off basically showing a couple on a beach, and then slowly, well, I sped it up for you so you wouldn't have to see the whole thing. But it basically just goes up by the power of 10 to where you see the city, the lake, the continent, the earth, and then slowly but surely you see the solar system. And it just keeps panning and pulling out until our own galaxy itself, our own solar system, becomes this dot in this great, vast sea of stars. And then it just keeps going out. And even that speck gets lost when it starts becoming part of a greater Milky Way. And then it's just like, where are we? Like, we are there where we were, and now that's a dot, and it's gone. And actually, I don't blame the filmmakers for stopping at that point. It's like, how far out can you go? You can't stop. So what they did is they reversed it, went all the way back to that couple on the beach, and they say, well, let's go the opposite way. And so they take his hand, and they actually go in, and you can start seeing the skin, the blood vessels, the blood itself. You start seeing eventually you get to the point where you actually see a DNA strands, and eventually you actually start seeing an atom. But what's amazing about that is to get to the atom, what is all that? Emptiness. And this atom, you know what's amazing about that is that all this is made up of mostly emptiness, right? But all the atoms come together to get us this solidity that happens. Where's that transition that occurs from atom to solid? It's called emergence, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. But basically what that did for me, it showed me that the universe, There's infinite infinite bigness, infinite littleness. Where's your boundaries at that point? And what about time? Now, we're talking about levels, right? From the very, very large to the very small. But what if we put that fourth dimension, time, into it? Is this a system or a collection of parts? It's a piece of art in the New York Parkway, and all it is a slab of aluminum and magnesium bolted together. System or collection of parts? What do you think it is? Yeah, but what's amazing, he called this piece of art 3000 AD. Does anybody have a reason why he called it 3000 AD? Because that's when he says this work of art will be finished. In 3000 AD, the magnesium and aluminum will merge together and become an alloy, and it'll become one block, not just two. So it's a system because it's bringing itself together as it goes along. The other thing is, it's a system or a collection of parts. Is it parts? Collection of parts? But what's it doing as we're watching it? Yeah. Time. If we put time into this collection of parts, what happens to it? All of a sudden, it starts becoming this system where its purpose is to biodegrade efficiently, right? And just take all that stuff back into its where it belongs. So this is a major tenet of Zen, as a matter of fact. They look at the universe, understanding there's no difference between matter or energy. They actually look at anything close enough, you'll see that it's an event, not a thing. But here's the kicker. We're human. We love putting boundaries around something, calling it a thing, and actually naming it. As a matter of fact, at the beginning of, if we were a caveman, or if God created us, one of the first things we did was start naming things. As a matter of fact, in the Bible, there's a great quote in Genesis where the Lord God formed Adam, and what did he start doing? Naming the animals. He was like, oh, there's an animal. I'm going to name that a skunk because it stinks, and there's something with a long neck. A giraffe. I'll call that a giraffe. So he started naming all these things. And even in non-Western world, they were worried about this. As a matter of fact, there's the Tao Te Ching, which is part of, I want to get this right. It's a fundamental text for Taoism. And they have this great saying, once the whole is divided, the parts need names. There's already enough names. One must know when to stop. Knowing when to stop averts trouble. I love the fact that they're like, they realize if you just keep going, because there's just too many parts to everything and stuff. As a matter of fact, if you think about Western culture, how we started with the Greeks, Aristotle actually was a master at this. He was actually the father of biology. He identified, classified animals based on their physical characteristics. He also loved his little rhetoric techniques, and he had a rational system for talking about rhetoric, and he had two ways of looking at it: particular proofs and topics, and common proofs. As a matter of fact, Pirsig, in his book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, didn't like this at all. He said Aristotle was tremendously satisfied with this neat little stunt of naming and classifying everything. His world began and ended with this stunt, okay? But what's interesting about this stunt, if we take it a little bit further, is the fact that it actually helped us understand the universe better. Because once you start to be able to name bound and name anything in your purview, eventually it'll make sense to take something larger and break it out down into smaller pieces. So basically you'll get, and it took years, right? There was Aristotle naming, classifying everything, and I'm sure plenty of natural philosophers were doing that up to Descartes. And then Descartes said, look, if you have a problem, let's divide all the difficulties under examination into as many parts as possible and as many as required to solve them the best way. The father of the analytical technique, right? So that was a thing called reductionism. And actually reductionism and analysis is the basis, the cornerstone of all scientific thinking. As a matter of fact, and the reason I call this the triumph of reductionism is you can actually see there's this line that says reductionism was understood. Now all of a sudden you have a scientific revolution from understanding how the sun works to understanding gravity. And once that started happening, we started getting better applied science, that's engineering, right? And before you knew it, we were able to increase our population 7-fold in 200 years. Prior to that, in this to the 1800s, right? We started out like with 350,000 people, and it took 1,200 years to get to 1 billion, all right? And then all of a sudden, we have this thing called technology. And it was allowed us to be able to change the world for the better, so now that we can have a human growth that is unprecedented. But there are limits to this. Reductionism's done a lot of great things, and everything you look around your modern world, science and analysis has allowed this to happen. But there are limitations. We're going to talk about Senge, I believe his name is, Peter Senge. He's the one who wrote The Fifth Discipline. Has anybody read The Fifth Discipline? Very famous book. Systems thinking, right? It's like, that's what the fifth discipline is all about. And he talks about at the very early age, we're taught to break apart problems, to fragment the world. This apparently makes complex tasks and subjects more manageable, but we pay a hidden and enormous price. We no longer see the consequences of our actions. We lose our intrinsic sense of connection to the larger whole. When we then try to see the big picture, we try to reassemble the fragments in our minds, to list, to organize the pieces, but after a while, we give up trying to see the whole altogether. And the issue we get into is the fact that what we're trying to do, and the price of reductionism, is not seeing the overall system. What we're trying to do, the problem we're running into, the whole point of reductionism is to get away from complexity, right? But you can't ignore complexity. I love this Zen quote. If you understand things, things are just as they are. If you don't understand, things are just as they are. Doesn't matter, right? You can't ignore complexity. It's still going to be there even after you do your reduction and do your analysis. Your complexity is still going to be there. The other thing that you can't do is study emergence. And the concept of emergence is that there are characteristics that the whole demonstrates that cannot be attributed to the components. A good case in point is your brain, okay? It's easy to think your brain, it's got a lot of moving, electrical parts working and stuff, right? But can you pull out a neuron and say, here's a thought? No. As a matter of fact, consciousness is one of the things scientists have the hardest issues with, right? As a matter of fact, if you look long enough, and I have, emergence becomes this real issue with scientists. Because why? They can't look at emergence from a reductionist standpoint. It's only when it's all together and you have aspects working. As a matter of fact, there's a great radio podcast called Radio Lab. I've been listening to them for about 10 years or something. But at the very beginning, they did this great radio program called Emergence. And they interviewed this lady who was studying ants. And she was like, you know, I'm studying ants. And of course, they're amazing creatures. They're able to like build these great almost castles, sand things, right? And they're able to herd other critters in there to help them out. They get ready for fighting and stuff like that. But individual ants, right? And she said this, she said individual ants, they could grab one side of a stick and another one grabs the other side of the stick, and they'll do that all day, going back and forth, not knowing what to do. She goes, they're dumb as posts as individuals, right? She goes, but when you start looking back and seeing the collective, all of a sudden it's this brilliant species. So what is that about? It's emergence. It's like you can't figure out how they're able to do what they do unless you pull all the way back and look at emergence. So an appeal, and Jeffrey Goldstein has a lot to say about emergence. He says, the appeal to emergence is thus a way to describe the need to go to the macro level, its unique dynamics, laws, and properties in order to explain more adequately what's going on. Actually, what he's saying, right, is the exact opposite of analysis. So we have this need to understand the universe better, right? And it turns out Aristotle didn't ignore this. He loved naming things, right? But back then, I don't believe they had analysis. That didn't come until the scientific revolution. He was able to decode things, put things in a hierarchy. He loved doing that, right? But he also observed that system properties will manifest only when the components interacted. And those system level properties were different than the individual things. That's why he said the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So even the Greeks understood it wasn't enough just to break things down and understand them. There was something else happening at the system level. And of course, they didn't use system back then, right? That wasn't a word that existed. But the word whole did. And that's when they talked about systems, they talked about the whole. Well, it took years. I mean, even the scientific revolution didn't catch this one, right? So it wasn't until around a little before the Civil War, John Stuart Mill in his System of Logic said, no mere summing up of separate actions of those elements will ever amount to the action of the living body itself. He was a philosopher in chemistry and biology, and he just realized, how does this chemistry work? You take these two chemicals that will kill a person, and you put them together, and they're essential for life. What? You know? And that's the type of emergence that he couldn't get a handle on. And as a matter of fact, several years later, George H. Lewis actually, in his Problems of Life, used the word emergent. He said emergent cannot be reduced either to their sum or their differences. He's talking about biology at that point. Another biologist, much later, right, about 50 years later, actually came up with the book called Holism and Evolution. And I want to read this to you because I don't want to miss this. He argued that the unity of parts can be so close and intense as to be more than the sum of the parts, which not only gives to a particular conformation or structure the parts, so relates and determines them in their synthesis that their functions are altered. The synthesis affects and determines the parts so that the function towards the whole, or as I said, system, right? And so notice that in his book, he's talking about synthesis. So that's one of the keys, right? The complete opposite of analysis is synthesis. So let's take it from there. I'm moving from the 1900 to now. What have we tried to do in order to try to push back against what these limitations are? One book that came out was Norbert Wiener. He made Wiener. He did cybernetics in the control of communications in animal machine. Cybernetics is looking at the feedback aspect of and control and communications at the system level. We also have C.W. Churchman. He actually advocated the industrial use of operations research, which was an outgrowth of using scientific methods, techniques, and tools to solve military problems during World War II. Oop, went too far. Bertalanffy, I always call him Butterfly, but Bertalanffy, he's I believe Swedish biologist or German biologist. He actually founded found the general systems theory. The whole idea was maybe if we look at things from a systems level, we'll find similarities between systems. And he was actually hoping to get a unification of science out of that. Didn't quite work out the way he hoped. But you know, intriguing nonetheless, because as a biologist, he was struggling with those limitations that traditional scientists bring. And then J. Forrester, system dynamics, right? He was the one who had understood that nonlinear behavior of complex systems over time can kind of explain systems a lot better as we went along. From there, we have Arthur Koestler. He came up with the ghost in the machine. He's the one who came up with the holons. You remember I said that in that one quote dealing with systems. Now, a holon is both a whole and a part, or a system and a subsystem, right? So it's if you have a system in your, if you have a subsystem in your system that's actually a system, then it's a holon. And I didn't catch on because we already have system and subsystem. We don't need a new word for that. But it's interesting that he actually understood the fact that there were these levels and things. The last but not least is Peter Churchman and his systems thinking, and Peter Senge with his fifth discipline. Again, trying to talk about systems thinking and applying it to organizations as well as into societal levels. Each of these disciplines within systems science is trying to fix that limitation of reductionism. You know, it's actually trying to say, how can we start looking at the universe in a more holistic way as we go forward? As a matter of fact, system science is an oxymoron, right? Love that word because you hear moron more than anything else. But oxymoron just means there's something different about these two things, and to put them together, right? What's that? Defense intelligence was one that they threw in. Yeah. But the idea that you have science, which is this holistic view of comprehending phenomena using synthesis, and yet you have scientists, which is a reductionist view using analysis. It's two different things, right? System science. So it is an oxymoron in that respect. As a matter of fact, the ones that I showed you, all these, they were just the beginning wave. Notice here, 1990, around this time frame here, if I actually go to the next one, boom. It just, all these various complexity sciences went crazy, from system science to complex system theory, self-organization, dynamics in system network, complexity through epistology, I can't even read that. And then e-science, and then data data science, even data science, is complexity that's involved. The whole point is, look how much it's taking for us to address that whole reductionism issue, right? All this is because of that, as we're trying to work it through. So my issue is, it's okay that system science is an oxymoron. It's okay. Because we should use traditional science, and we should use the system science too. A good system scientist or philosopher uses both reductionism and a holistic approach as well. Consider the care for which he considers the detailed structure of a system, and the meticulous attention he gives to establishing the proper relationships between objects, the methodical way in which he builds the whole model from these parts, having, of course, first defined the boundaries of the whole system, the agonies he goes through as he tries to establish the validity of the model. It's good hypothetical reductionism science, and it's good reductionism and holism. And if you read that whole center section as a system engineer, it's being a good system engineer too. So think about and I didn't put this on a slide, I probably should have, the two sides of the V, right? First side, we reduce, try to figure it all out. And then on the other side, when we start integrating and making sure it works, all of a sudden that synthesis kicks in, right? And of course, we need to do that design by thinking about the reduction in the synthesis simultaneously as we go forward. So this is a great description of a system engineer, of the meticulousness and the agonies that they go through in order to make this work. So a good systems thinker will use both. Conclusion, why systems thinking? As a matter of fact, I was thinking of starting this by talking about the fact that, have you noticed how there's always a bunch of program management type fads that are out there, right? So you get TQM as one, right? What's the latest one? I think design, ops-driven development, right, is something and stuff. It's always something out there that they want to try. And a lot of them, you can actually look back and go, oh yeah, that was a fad. But I really don't think this is a fad, because it really is attacking that fundamental issue that we have with science and reductionism. And we need both as we go. So use both system science and traditional. And it's new and it's young. You saw all those people trying to figure this out. There's no unified theory out there yet, but give it time. I think the more we study systems, the more we understand it, the better we'll be as system engineers as we go forward and do our discipline better. So last quote, a shift of the mind. This is from the fifth discipline again. A shift of the mind is going from seeing parts to seeing wholes, from seeing people as helpless reactors to seeing them as active participants in shaping their reality, from reacting to the present to creating the future. And that's really what system engineering is all about. There we go. Thank you. Appreciate it. Now,
Thank you,
I know
Paul.
there's a lot of questions, so
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that was a lot of good information. We'll probably need to go back, look at the video over and over again to get all the details out of it. But yeah, it's time for questions, and please wait for a microphone so we can get it on the video. Thank you.
So while you're waiting for that, I just wanted to remind you, I do own a company that I help teach, the Handbook, if you want to pass that. I do have all these references. So what I'll do at the YouTube site, I might be able to put up these slides as well as the references for you. So I have the Zen as well as the references for the systems thinking, okay? Put the slides up.
We can put the slides up on our website.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah. I like the way I'm so thorough that you guys have no questions whatsoever. So nobody wants to take me to task for my thought?
Excuse
there
me.
you go.
I'm Robert Emmett. I'm an electrical engineer, self-employed. Now, the information you're going to give, is it connected to Johns Hopkins EDU?
No,
No.
no, no.
Okay.
Right, yeah, I'm self-employed and this is just my ramblings, right?
Okay,
It's
good.
just me thinking out loud and stuff. Actually, it's interesting because ever since I've been teaching at UMBC, I'm an adjunct professor there. I've been teaching about 10 years, system engineering, integration, verification, validation. And I almost inevitably, when I'm talking about science, system science, I go on this rant. And from the very beginning, I said, when you think about science and blah, 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 and I used to just get so upset. But going through this kind of helped me heal that because it did make me realize there's no need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. What a terrible expression. Seriously, comes up with these things. Yeah.
Paul,
Yes.
I think you're aware that Incose has a system science. working
Yes.
group.
Yes, I've been to it. Yes. Same
Does-
problem. Yeah.
Is it leading to something that's going to be beneficial?
Yeah.
Because one of the first things, well, you said system thinking really wasn't a science, but is system science a science?
Yes. Yes, that's why I talk about it as an oxymoron, is that the studying of systems, is it really a science and stuff? So that's, yeah. And actually, I've been to the Incose one at some of the symposiums, and you know what they get wrapped up in? Just trying to define things. They're just saying, well, you know, that whole boundary I'm talking about, let's classify, let's figure it out. And it's just like that quote that we got from the Taoism there, quote, you need to know when to stop before there's trouble. And it's just, I can see them having trouble trying to stop because it is hard. It is hard.
Follow up. My
Yeah.
perception in listening to some of their presentations is that somehow they think that system engineering needs that underpinning in order to have respect from every other engineering discipline as well as the sciences themselves.
You know why? You know why? This is, now I'm going to get on my lecture thing here. So this is what I tell my students all the time. I say, system engineer, you look at your electrical engineers and they have their ohms and their resistors, right? And they have their equations, right? Even chemical, as much as a thing, it's all written down. They've got that understood. Nuclear, aeronautics, they all have aspects to it where they can point to and say, look, science taught me that. But where as us system engineers, where can we point? Okay, you could say, yeah, well, system science. No, because almost everything you've built or are building, either you've seen it before or you need to model it, right? Because you can't deal with the emergence. Science can't deal with emergence. And emergence is what you're trying to understand for your final system. And so to me, I as a system engineer, you guys are system engineers. When's the last time we opened up a system science book to understand something? And so I just think there's a real aspect where science has failed in that regard with the emergence. Even system science is trying to get there. But believe me, I've read the books on it. It gets almost philosophically religious at a point because there's no answer. It's very difficult. And I think the best we can do is do what we've been doing so well all this time, model what we're thinking of building and see what the emergent properties are and make sure there's nothing that we don't want, right? So
Yeah, I would say, two observations. One is that I'm thinking, if we look at the transition of science from the 19th century to the 20th century to the 21st century, it was about in the middle of the 20th century that what you would call soft sciences
Yes, that's right.
emerged, right?
Yeah.
And anthropology and history and even history as a science is still being debated, but there was very much of a motion. So I wonder whether this may not be caught up in that. But
That's actually a good point. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
But another one I wanted you to comment upon was when I at least have studied science, or as I've been taught to study science, the notion is that what science really turns out down to be is testability of hypothesis and verification.
Yes.
And reproducibility of results.
Yes.
Otherwise, that's not considered a science, right? That's kind of the fundamental scientist line in the sand. And when you think of something like complexity and emergence, since these are not necessarily predictable outcomes.
Yes.
Right? So the economist problem is a great example of this, right? So I would like you to comment on that. When you think about system science, are we starting to draw a box around reproducible system effects, as opposed to studying emergence, which would in some sense apply to looking at the uncertainty of outcome?
Yeah, and I think that's the issue I have is that, like I said, all those other disciplines have their science that they can point to and say, look, I know the equation here, but I put the electrical there, magnetic there, and I know what's going to happen, right? I can actually figure it out. For us, there are no scientific equations for emergence. They don't exist. We just know that it's there. We're aware of it. It's in the handbook. You can read the handbook. Watch out for emergence. That's all it says. It's not going to give you any more than that. So you're kind of forced into almost like the history economists. We're thinking through this as much as we can. And then the economists do this, right? They model it, right? And they say, if we model everything, we might be able to understand the emergence better. If we can start designing a system without modeling and understand the emergence and build it, then we've discovered the science that we need. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. If anybody has heard of someone able to do that, I would love to hear that. So I believe one over here. Yes. Bob. Yeah, you got to turn it on. There you go.
Bertalanffy's book, 72 edition, we started using some of those diagrams in the late 60s at Boston U System Engineering Master's Program. But I wanted to, can you go back to slide 5? Also, Bertalanffy was talking about multidisciplinary.
Yes.
Yeah,
and he started the Santa Fe Institute, and they actually brought in different things, and that's actually complexity was one of their outgrowths, the Santa Fe. A lot of these slides, actually, I should be, well.
Back to 5.
5? I have to go all the way back. All right, we'll figure it out. By the way, you like my...
well, anyway, I had a question.
So we'll get there. So what's your question? Do you have to look at 5?
Yeah, I was a little rusty when you talked about adjective and noun.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Active thinking.
Did I do that wrong? I actually should have gotten an English major looking at this. Did I do this right? I got this actually out of the systems thinking book. So it's right out of this. So if he got it wrong, then we're wrong there.
Yeah, I had a question on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I thought that's action thinking.
Yeah.
That's all. I don't want to nitpick, but it caught my eye right at the beginning.
Yeah, get the book. But a noun is...
Which book?
Yeah.
Which book was that?
The one we're getting out. It's called Systems Thinking Made Simple. And as a matter of fact, we're going to draw for this soon. So, yes. One last question.
This is less a question right now, so I've been trying to figure out how to formulate the question.
Yes.
You reminded me that I had a very fortunate experience after I graduated my master's from Rensselaer in '66, because I started graduate studies while working for Boeing after I got out of school, doing system engineering before it was considered what we are now.
Yeah.
And they were on the leading edge of trying to implement the new disciplines.
Yeah, that's right. 60s
But
is when
then
it started.
because I had 4 courses from ACOF in particular,
ACOF.
that was just the beginning,
Oh,
because he had set up several different forum in which we had Churchman, ACOF, Arnold,
oh my God.
and Rappaport.
Seriously?
And I would just call that the clash of Titan egos.
It is true. When you read about these guys, it's true.
But-
Especially Forrester. Oh my God, get him involved.
Well, I have some considerable problems with Forrester, because we, as one of our graduate questions we had to address, what's the failing of Forrester? And the principal thing it turned out is that he would not accept the fact that there would be deflection or inflection points.
Oh yeah, right.
Okay,
I remember
very
that.
clearly.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So that was a critical thing.
He-
And he got into it with
Oh,
ACOF,
man.
and ACOF gave a particular definition for what he was talking about.
You're right.
He was always exceptionally precise with his definitions,
Yeah,
even if they were long, but he was precise.
yeah.
And Forrester basically came back and said in a large, grandiose number of words, is that he didn't have one. He says, then we have no further reason to communicate at all.
Oh my God, that's totally
That
Forrester.
was total. There was probably 500 people in that.
I love this one thing where Forrester, he felt that he was so confident in system dynamics, he felt on the back of a napkin and he could explain the world. I'm like, really? Have you ever read The Incredible Hulk where he got shrunk? And I mean, just, he can't understand the world.
But I'm getting to something that it was surprising, because I've forgotten it completely. When I was working at Boeing, I was surprised to find that there was a PhD botanist, biologist, who was on the engineering staff.
Oh,
And the reason is that he had the uncanny knack, through his understanding of taxonomies in particular, to understand the breakdown and buildup
the work breakdowns.
for the systems completely and totally, and could fill out the RAS charts that we had to fill out by hand then and everything else.
Especially for something as complicated as you were working with. All right, guys, let's go ahead and thank you for the questions. Of course, we'll get this up online. Let's go ahead and get the book.
Yeah, we have a drawing ready.
Get your thing out. This is a great book. You'll love this. I actually asked them to get it because I bought it for myself when I first heard him talk. He talked at Northern Grumman. We were trying to get systems thinking more into. Okay, so I guess I should have glasses. What's the whole idea of your eyes? 718.